Here's an early look at the MayDay STOL crash that involved the Cessna 140 this past Friday. STOL competitions are becoming increasingly popular at air shows and fly-ins, and the MayDay STOL event in Wayne, Nebraska was all around a STOL Drag competition. In STOL Drag, the competitors take off, fly a straight line for a couple thousand feet, land, turn around, fly back to the start line, and once they pass the start line, they land and stop as quick as possible. The fastest one to run the course wins the STOL Drag competition. At the MayDay STOL event in Wayne, Nebraska this past Friday, they canceled the STOL Drag event due to winds. Winds were out of the northwest, gusting from 15 to 20 knots, and earlier in the day they were gusting even stronger. The winds were too strong for the STOL Drag competition because in STOL Drag you almost always land with a tailwind since you go up and back on the same line. The competitors decided to fly a typical STOL demonstration where they fly a typical VFR box pattern, one at a time, and take off as short as possible, land as short as possible, and the combined distance of their takeoff and their landing is their overall score. In the accident, the pilot took off in a Cessna 140 and he was following a Zenith 601. As we can see from the video, he gets a little tight on this Zenith 601 on short final, so he engages in what appears to be an S-turn to gain some spacing. He loses control of the airplane and crashes and results in a fatality. If we look closely at the video, we can also see that the winds are coming from straight ahead and a little bit off to the left side. So when the pilot does his S-turn maneuver, he's below the airplane in front of him, and so he moves in the direction of any wake turbulence if there would have been any there. So something to consider, and I'm sure the NTSB will look at, is whether or not is how the pilot lost control of the airplane. It's obviously he's flying slow to try to keep as much spacing as he can from the airplane in front of him. He begins a turn, it appears, and so in that turn, it's not clear exactly how he lost control, but it does appear to be a stall spin accident. Whether or not he flew in the wake turbulence was a contributing factor of that, is something to be determined. Whatever the NTSB determines as the cause of how the pilot lost control of the airplane, there are several factors here which STOL competitors and STOL organizers can consider in follow-on STOL competitions. First, we should look at the lineup of airplanes in the order in which they participate in the STOL demonstration. Faster airplanes should go first, so allow for them to get more spacing from the slower airplanes behind them and not have to worry so much about their speed on final. In this case, a Cessna 140 has a faster final speed than the Zenith 601, and so as slow as the pilot could get in the Cessna 140, he would still be losing distance in between himself and the Zenith 601 on final. Organizers will need to consider the speed of airplanes around the pattern, and faster airplanes would be better to go first. Secondly, they should look closely at the time intervals between takeoffs. It appears just watching the tapes that they were flying in about 25-second intervals from takeoff to takeoff. And that seemed to be enough spacing for most of the airplanes, but in this case it didn't seem to be enough spacing for the Cessna 140 behind the Zenith 601. Perhaps a 30-second interval or longer would be good for organizers to look at. And then they should also look at a very structured pattern to fly the STOL demonstration. If pilots are required to fly specific points around the pattern and not allowed to take shortcuts, that will help maintain the spacing throughout. Another consideration is organizers should consider not allowing any type of maneuvers on final for spacing, S-turns or any other kinds of maneuvers, and perhaps even allow only one airplane on final at a time. If the organizers also had a safety observer nearby with a radio, the safety observer could call for certain airplanes in the pattern to break out if necessary. And then finally, they should brief a breakout procedure such that if pilots get tight on the airplane in front of them, they can break out of the pattern, perhaps on downwind or on base, and circle around and find themselves in the back of the line or in a new position for their run through. So broadening our lessons here to all pilots, If ever you find yourself on short final and your spacing is tight, an aircraft hasn't left the runway or for whatever reason, then in general, turns on final are a bad idea, especially at slow speed. The best approach is to power up, maintain your airspeed, and then put your aircraft in the most optimum position to minimize the conflict with another airplane. Typically that's a go-around on either side of the runway. But in any case, slowing down on final to close to your stall speed or below your normal approach speed is just in general a practice that pilots should avoid. There are a few other takeaways that come out of this accident, whether or not they prove to be a factor in this tragedy. First is just how fast an airplane will depart controlled flight when it's in an uncoordinated flight at high angle of attack or slow speed. In this case, we had a highly experienced pilot. He'd flown this airplane in these kinds of competitions and demonstrations a lot, and yet still the airplane departed faster than he could recover. And it's a warning to all of us to be careful about coordinated turns when we're at high angle of attack or slow speed. And then finally, wake turbulence. Understanding the movement of wake turbulence of aircraft in front of us with the wind. Whenever we're behind and below an aircraft, we need to understand our position relative to the wake turbulence and where it's moving. May or may not have been a factor in this mishap, but it illustrates the point and reminds us it's a factor to consider. STOL demonstrations and STOL Drag is fun and exciting. It's a new part of aviation that's bringing people into aviation. People are coming out to fly-ins and air shows specifically to watch the STOL demonstration and the STOL Drag. A little bit of update in the procedures as we go along will help maintain this excitement and keep them safe for future participants. Stay tuned to AOPA channels and we'll keep you updated as we learn more about this STOL accident. Thank you for supporting AOPA and allowing us to provide these analyses that hopefully help us all become safer pilots.